G'day buddies, I am Jackaroo Turu, and on this channel I talk about Australian Aboriginal languages, predominantly the Pama-Nyungan ones. So in an earlier video I looked at words with adjectival meanings in the Ngara language. And I hope I was able to show that there is really no point in distinguishing an adjectival word clause. For one thing, for example, words with adjectival meanings in Ngara take case marking. So it's much more reasonable to place them in the big nominal word clause. And as it so happens, I intend to do a series about words, about the different subgroups that we find in the nominal word clause. And it so happens that the situation found for words with adjectival meanings in Ngara is the same as is found in many Pama-Nyungan languages. Now we might ask ourselves, what about words with adverbial meanings? In European languages, adverbs are a distinct word clause, and adverbs tend to modify either the verb of a clause, hence the term adverb. They can also modify an adjective, or in fact another adverb. Yes, in Ngara it so happens that words with adverbial meanings also take case marking. However, I found an article by Albert Bergman about one man. Who knows if Albert is watching, by the way. Hi Albert. One man is a language that belongs to the Wadi subgroup of the Pama-Nyungan language family. To the Wadi subgroup also belongs the big Western Desert dialect chain. Claire Bowen or Bowen, I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. Anyway, she has placed Ngadi in this subgroup as well. And there seems to be a certain amount of disagreement about as to whether Andagarinya should belong to Wanman as a Wanman dialect or to Western Desert. So it would seem that perhaps Andagarinya is intermediate between the two. Wanman comes from the Great Sandy Desert in the eastern part of the Pilbara region of Western Australia. So Albert Bergman has written this article where he argues that these 5 words need to be distinguished from nominals and verbs in Wanman and placed in their own word clause, the adverb clause. Albert Bergman, by the way, is also responsible for this one, the Wanman sketch grammar. Yes, and in the article he looks specifically at the first one, parra, which means around or about. But he mentions that the situation found for parra is the same as is found for these other 4 words. So these other 4 words being ma, which means keep on doing something. And these 3 actually all mean the same thing. Pudu, padal, and yagalba means in vain or fail to. So, Albert looks at both morphological and syntactic criteria to establish that para is neither a nominal nor a verb, but something else. So when it comes to morphological criteria, first of all, he notes that para does not take nominal inflections, so no case marking. Neither does it take primary or secondary verbal inflections, he writes. So what are those? Primary verbal inflections distinguish different tenses, aspects, and moods. And the secondary inflections, when they are used, they are always placed after the primary verbal inflections, hence the term secondary verbal inflections. And they provide further specification to the primary verbal inflection. Yes, so no nominal inflections, no primary or secondary verbal inflections, but para takes pronominal enclitics, also known as bound pronouns. And this is important according to Albert Bergman, because this means that we can establish that para is not an affix, a prefix, or a suffix, but rather a word in its own right. And why is that? Well, in the languages in this Pama-Nyungan subgroup, pronominal enclitics are generally placed after the first word or the first phrase of a statement, one of the two. So the first word or phrase take the pronominal enclitics. This, by the way, is called Wackernagel's law. You can look it up if you like. Wackernagel, German name, starts with a W. Yes, so here we have para ja, where ja is the third person plural subject marker. And this sentence means my mother and father traveled around. By the way, while it is the usual and common thing to place pronominal enclitics after the first word or phrase, on occasion they are split up. I mention this because perhaps someone has noted that we have one pronominal enclitic over here as well. Let's look at the syntactic criteria now. First we have juxtaposition with the verb. This is to say that para occurs next to the verb and almost always directly before. We have talked about pronominal enclitics, also known as bound pronouns. Now, this example is different than this one, because here the pronominal enclitics occur after the first phrase. So the first phrase being para ngan babarna bulara, all of it with pronominal enclitics. So what this shows is that para belongs to the verb phrase. Yes, and what does this sentence mean? They looked around at him and entered there. They, in the context being two small rats, and the place where they entered being a hole. Yes. Then we have reiterated phrases. Phrases can be reiterated in 1 month for emphasis. This is the same as in ngara, as it so happens. I didn't write the glossing here, as you can see. I tried to squeeze everything in on the board here, everything I wanted on it. So anyway, this means, this sentence, all the time he goes along and kills. Following around the poor animals. He ate them. And here Albert writes that it's interesting and important that both para and wanalili being the verb, that they are reiterated together, because that both shows that they are part of the same phrase and that the speaker considers them one block of meaning. So this means then that para is indeed closely tied to the verb, but as we have seen, it is in fact not a prefix. It is a word in its own right. And then we have serial verb constructions. Unlike in the Ngara language, which I know, that is the language I have studied. Unlike in Ngara, serial verb constructions are very common in 1 month. And in the serial verb construction, 2 or more verbs in the prototypical case occur next to each other. They together describe one event, and only one of the verbs take tense, aspect, and mood marking. And in 1 month, other verbs take the serial verb marker. So, here we have the bottom example where we have the verb here, nyanya, that takes the tense. So, nya is the verb root, to look. And the second nya in nyanya is in fact the past tense marker used for this verb. And then we have para, which comes right before, as it usually does. And para here, in fact, takes the serial verb marker. So let's see, what does this sentence mean? It means he dug a hole and looked around. So Albert concludes in this article that para is a word, not a prefix, that it belongs closely to the verb, is a part of the verb phrase, but he feels that para should be placed in a separate word class, because although it takes the serial verb suffix here, nevertheless, it does not take the primary or secondary verbal inflections that the main verb of a clause always takes. So, adverbs in 1 month, always modifying the verb, usually occurring right before the verb. In 2009, the Wankamaya Language Institute looked into how many people actually could speak 1 month at that point. They concluded that there were around 30 fluent speakers, but many more partial speakers. One man has been the subject of language revitalization since then, and let's hope they can indeed revive this language. I hope so. That would be a good thing. And in the one-man sketch grammar, Albert points out that there are still things to look into about this language. Concerning this language, you can see a question mark here, for example. But this will be all for today. I will be back, as I said, with videos about nominal subclasses. So, see you later.